The sun was setting over New Haven Colony when Daniel Cole heard the explosion in the distance, and he grabbed his medical kit without hesitation, running toward the sound that echoed across the rocky plains of Keldar 7. Daniel had been a combat medic during the Centauri conflict, and old habits never truly died, so when danger called, his body moved before his mind could argue, his boots pounding against the dusty ground as orange light painted the sky ahead of him. He was 34 years old now, living a quiet life as the colony's emergency responder, a far cry from the battlefields he had known. But tonight the universe seemed determined to remind him that peace was always temporary. The ravine came into view, and Daniel stopped at its edge, his breath catching in his throat as he stared at the wreckage below. A crashed ship unlike anything he had ever seen, its hull covered in scales that shimmered like molten copper even through the smoke. This was not a human vessel, and it was not from any species registered in the Galactic Union's database, which meant he should call it in immediately, report the unknown contact, and wait for security to arrive. But Daniel heard something that changed everything, a sound that cut through the crackling flames and groaning metal, a weak cry that could only belong to a child. He scrambled down the ravine without thinking, sliding on loose rocks, his medical training screaming at him to assess the danger first, but his heart refusing to listen because somewhere in that burning wreck, a young one was dying. The heat hit him like a wall as he approached the ship, and he pulled his jacket over his mouth, squinting through the smoke until he found a gap in the twisted hull, crawling through despite the sharp edges that tore at his sleeves. Inside the ship, the air glowed with an eerie light, and Daniel followed the weak crying until he found the source, and what he saw made him freeze in place. A child lay among the debris, but not a human child. This creature had scales that shifted between gold and copper, small wings folded against its back, and eyes like dying embers that flickered with fading life. It looked like something from the old Earth legends his grandmother used to tell him, a dragon from fairy tales made real and bleeding on the floor of an alien spacecraft. The creature's blood was not red but orange, glowing like liquid fire as it pooled beneath the small body, and Daniel could see the terrible wounds that covered its chest and arms. Injuries that would kill it within minutes if he did nothing. Protocol demanded he report this immediately, and hostile alien species had attacked human colonies before. But Daniel looked at those flickering eyes filled with pain and terror, and he saw only what he had always seen in moments like this, someone who needed help. He knelt beside the creature and opened his medical kit, his hands steady despite the impossibility of the situation, speaking softly even though he doubted it could understand him. "Hey there, little one, I'm going to help you. Okay, just stay with me." The creature flinched at his touch but was too weak to pull away, and Daniel worked quickly, applying modified bandages to the worst wounds, using clotting agents that he prayed would work on alien biology. The orange blood began to slow, and Daniel let out a breath he did not know he was holding, carefully lifting the small creature into his arms, feeling the strange warmth that radiated from its scaled skin. He should take it to the colony med bay where the real doctors could examine it, where security could secure it, where everything could be done by the proper rules. But Daniel knew what would happen then. The creature would be treated as a potential threat, locked away, studied like a specimen, and he could not do that to a child, no matter what species it belonged to. So he made a choice that would change everything, turning away from the colony's bright lights and walking instead toward his small home on the settlement's edge. The creature stirred in his arms as he walked, those ember eyes opening to look up at him with confusion and fear, a small clawed hand gripping weakly at his shirt. "You are safe now," Daniel told it, his voice gentle, like he was speaking to any frightened child. "I am not going to hurt you, I promise." He reached his home as darkness fell completely, carrying the alien inside and laying it carefully on his bed. gathering every medical supply he owned and preparing for a long night. The wounds were worse than he had first thought, and Daniel worked for hours, cleaning and bandaging, monitoring vital signs that he could only guess at, refusing to let exhaustion stop him. Twice the creature stopped breathing, and twice Daniel brought it back, his combat medic training kicking in, even though nothing in his experience had prepared him for treating a dragon from the stars. Near midnight, the creature's eyes opened again, clearer this time, focusing on Daniel's face with something like wonder. It tried to speak, its voice barely a whisper, struggling with sounds that eventually formed words in broken universal standard. "Why?" it asked, and Daniel could hear the genuine confusion behind the question. "Why help?" Daniel paused his work and met those ember eyes, thinking about all the reasons he could give: duty, compassion, instinct. But what came out was simpler than any of those. "Because you needed it," he said, and that was the only truth that mattered. The creature stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in its expression, fear giving way to the first fragile seeds of trust. Then it spoke again, a single word that Daniel did not understand: Caliph. He did not know if it was a name, a warning, or something else entirely. But he nodded anyway, tucking a blanket around the small creature and settling into the chair beside the bed. "Rest now," Daniel said. "We can figure everything out in the morning." The creature's eyes slowly closed, its breathing evening out into sleep, and Daniel sat watching over it through the long night, wondering what he had gotten himself into. Outside his window, the stars burned cold and distant, and somewhere among them, something was searching for the child that now slept under his protection. Daniel did not know it yet, but his simple act of kindness had set events in motion that would shake the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again. 3 days passed, and the dragon child grew stronger with each sunrise, watching Daniel with those ember eyes that held 1,000 questions. Daniel learned that the creature's name was Varric, a young male of a species called the Draconith. And though their conversations were slow and difficult at first, they gradually began to understand each other. Varric was terrified in those early hours, flinching whenever Daniel moved too quickly, pressing himself against the wall when the human came near. And Daniel recognized that fear because he had seen it before in children who had survived terrible things. So he did not push, did not demand answers, simply went about his daily routine while leaving food and water within Varric's reach, letting the young Draconith observe him and decide for himself whether Daniel could be trusted. On the second day, Varric ate the fruit Daniel had left for him, and on the third day, he spoke more than single words, his universal standard improving with remarkable speed. "You are a strange human," Varric said, sitting up in the bed with his small wings twitching nervously. "My teachers say humans are primitive and dangerous. They say your kind fights and destroys, but you save me instead." Daniel sat in his chair across the room, giving Varric space, and he smiled at the words. "Well, I do not know about all humans, but I try not to hurt anyone, especially kids who crash land in my backyard." Varric tilted his head, a gesture that seemed to indicate confusion. "You do not fear me. Why not? My kind has fire in our blood. We could burn your whole colony." "Could you burn it right now?" Daniel asked gently. Varric looked down at his small clawed hands, shame crossing his young face. "No, I am just a hatchling. My fire is weak, and I am injured." "Then I guess I have nothing to worry about," Daniel said with a shrug, and something in Varric's expression softened. Over the next few hours, the young Draconith began to share his story, speaking in halting sentences about a civilization Daniel had never heard of. The Draconith sovereignty was ancient beyond human understanding, a species that had traveled the stars when humanity's ancestors were still learning to make fire, and they considered themselves guardians of cosmic balance. Their bodies could generate and control plasma, what other species called fire magic, and this power had made them both respected and feared across the galaxy. But the Draconith had chosen isolation centuries ago, withdrawing from galactic affairs and watching younger species from a distance, believing that interference caused more harm than good. "We do not talk to humans," Varric explained, his ember eyes growing sad. "The elders say your kind is too young, too violent. They say you must grow on your own." Daniel nodded slowly, not offended by the assessment because he knew humanity's history well enough to understand why outsiders might see them that way. "So what happened to you?" he asked. "Why were you out here alone?" Varric's scales flickered darker, fear and pain mixing in his young features, and when he spoke again, his voice trembled. "The Hollow Ones came." He told Daniel about a parasitic species that hunted Draconith children, creatures of darkness that fed on heat and life, and they especially craved the fire cores that gave young Draconith their power. Varric had been traveling with his guardians when the Hollow Ones attacked, and his protectors had fought bravely but were overwhelmed, putting Varric in an escape pod and launching him toward the nearest planet before they died. "They have gone because of me," Varric whispered, tears that glowed like tiny flames sliding down his scaled cheeks. "They died to save me, and I am not worth it." Daniel moved closer, slowly so he would not startle the child, and knelt beside the bed. "Listen to me, Varric. They saved you because they loved you, because your life mattered to them, and the best way to honor them is to live. Do you understand?" Varric looked at him with those ember eyes full of grief. "How do you know?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, memories surfacing that he usually kept buried. And then he made a choice to share something he rarely spoke about. "I had a wife," he said, his voice soft. "Her name was Elena, and she died 3 years ago during the war. A transport ship attacked while she was evacuating civilians. She stayed behind to help others escape." Varric listened in silence, his young face showing understanding beyond his years. "I blamed myself for a long time," Daniel continued. "I thought I should have been there, should have protected her. But eventually, I realized that she made her choice because she was brave and good. And hating myself would not bring her back." "You still miss her?" Varric asked quietly. "Every day," Daniel admitted. "But I keep going because that is what she would want. That is how I honor her memory." Varric was silent for a long moment, and then he reached out with one small clawed hand, touching Daniel's arm in a gesture that felt both alien and deeply familiar. "You are a kind human," Varric said. "My teachers were wrong about your species." Daniel smiled and gently patted the small hand. "Maybe we can surprise a lot of people together." From that moment, something changed between them, a bond forming that crossed the vast distance between their species, two wounded souls finding comfort in each other's company. Varric began calling Daniel, then Father, explaining that it was a sacred term among Draconith for those who protected and raised children not of their own blood. And Daniel felt honored even though he barely understood the weight of it. But their peaceful days were about to end. On the evening of the third day, there was a knock at Daniel's door, and he opened it to find Laura Bennett standing there, the colony's security officer and one of the few people Daniel considered a friend. "Daniel," she said, her expression troubled. "People are talking. They say you have been acting strange, staying home, avoiding everyone. And there are rumors about something you might have found near that crash site." Daniel kept his face calm, but his heart was pounding. "Just been feeling under the weather, Laura. Nothing to worry about." Laura studied him with eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. "I want to believe you, Daniel. But if you are hiding something, I need to know. My duty is to this colony." Before Daniel could respond, a cry came from inside the house, and both adults froze. Varric was convulsing on the bed, his scales flickering through colors like a broken light, and he gasped out words that made Daniel's blood run cold. "They are coming, Den Father, the Hollow Ones. They have found me. High above Caldara 7, 3 dark ships emerged from hyperspace, and aboard them, nightmares prepared to descend upon New Haven Colony. The colony's alarms screamed to life as 3 alien ships settled into orbit above Caldara 7, and every screen in New Haven flickered with the same terrifying message. "Surrender the Draconith child," the transmission demanded in a voice like grinding stone. "You have 1 hour or your colony burns." Lavra stared at Daniel with shock and hurt in her eyes. "What have you done?" "I saved a child's life," Daniel replied, gathering Varric into his arms as the young Draconith trembled with fear. "I will not apologize for that." "Daniel, those things up there could kill us all." "Then help me protect him, Lavra, please. He is just a kid." Laura's jaw tightened, conflict playing across her face, duty warring with the part of her that had always admired Daniel's unwavering compassion. And after a long moment, she made her choice. "I must be crazy," she muttered. "What do you need me to do?" But their brief alliance was tested within the hour when Colony Director Samuel Grant called an emergency meeting in the town square, demanding that everyone attend. Daniel tried to stay hidden, but word had already spread about the alien in his home. An angry colonist came looking for him, forcing him to face the crowd with Varric clutched against his chest. "This is insanity," Grant shouted, pointing at Daniel. "You have brought death upon us all for the sake of some alien creature." "He is a child," Daniel shouted back. "Look at him. He is scared and hurt, and I will not hand him over to monsters." The crowd murmured, some voices agreeing with Grant while others seemed uncertain, and an older woman near the front spoke up. "My grandson is 6 years old. If he were in danger, I would want someone to protect him, no matter what species he was." "This is not the same," a man argued. "That thing is not human. Neither were the Centauri, and we made peace with them eventually," Lavra said, stepping forward to stand beside Daniel. "The measure of who we are is not how we treat our friends. It is how we treat those who need our help." Grant's face reddened with fury. "Security Officer Bennett, I order you to arrest this man and surrender the alien." Lavra drew her sidearm, but instead of pointing it at Daniel, she aimed it at the ground and shook her head. "I will not do that, sir. If you want that child, you will have to take him yourself." The crowd erupted in argument, but before anything could be resolved, the sky tore open with fire as the Hollow Ones began their assault. Drop pods slammed into the colony's outer perimeter, and from them emerged nightmares given form. Creatures that seemed to absorb light itself, with bodies like living shadows and eyes that burned with hungry cold. Screams filled the air as colonists fled in every direction, and the Colonial Defense Force opened fire. But their weapons seemed to do little against the advancing horrors. "Fall back to the Eastern District," Grant screamed, all his authority crumbling in the face of true terror. "Everyone run." But Daniel did not run. He carried Varric toward his home on the colony's edge, where he had supplies and defenses prepared, where he could make a stand. Laura followed him, along with a handful of others. Victor Reyes, a retired Marine who still moved like a soldier despite his gray hair, Katie Shaw, a young engineer with more courage than common sense, and a few colonists who refused to abandon the child. They barricaded Daniel's home as the sounds of battle grew closer, and Victor checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. "I have fought a lot of things in my time," he said grimly, "but I have never seen anything like those creatures." "They feed on heat and life," Rick whispered, his ember eyes wide with terror. "They will not stop until they have me. You should let me go. I do not want you to die." "Nobody is dying today," Daniel said firmly, "and nobody is letting you go." Katie finished rigging the windows with improvised explosives. That should slow them down at least. The first Hollow One hit the door with enough force to crack the frame, and Laura opened fire, her shot striking the creature but barely slowing it down. "Aim for the eyes," Varric cried out. Their eyes are vulnerable. Victor adjusted his aim and fired, his shot piercing the creature's cold-burning eye, and it shrieked and dissolved into ash. Good to know. The old Marine growled, taking down another. But there were too many, and for every creature that fell, 3 more appeared, their shadowy forms pressing against the windows and walls, the temperature inside the house dropping rapidly. They are draining the heat. Katie shouted, her breath now visible in the air. They are trying to freeze us out. Victor held the main corridor alone as more creatures poured in, his body taking hit after hit, but he refused to fall. Get the kid out of here, he roared at Daniel. I will hold them. An explosion rocked the house as Katie's traps detonated, buying them precious seconds, but a hollow one broke through the chaos and lunged directly at Varric. Daniel threw himself in front of the creature without thinking, shielding the child with his own body, feeling cold claws tear into his back as he waited for death. But then small hands pressed against his chest, and Varric's voice filled his mind, speaking words in the ancient Draconith tongue. I give you my fire. Then, Father, I give you everything I have. Fight for us. Please fight for us. Heat exploded through Daniel's body, starting where Varric's hands touched him and spreading outward like a star being born inside his chest. His eyes flared with inner flame. His blood turned to liquid fire, and power unlike anything he had ever imagined surged through every fiber of his being. The hollow one that had been about to kill him recoiled in shock and pain as Daniel rose to his feet, wreathed in controlled plasma that burned white gold against the darkness. What is happening? Lavra gasped, staring at her friend who now blazed like a living torch. Varric slumped against the wall, exhausted but smiling. The firebond. He accepted it. He is one of us now. Daniel looked at his hands, flames dancing across his skin without burning him. And he felt Varric's presence in his mind, guiding him, teaching him, trusting him. Okay, Daniel said, his voice resonating with new power. Let me show you what a human can do with dragonfire. He turned toward the creatures that had invaded his home, that had threatened his colony, that had hunted an innocent child across the stars, and he let the fire answer his call. Daniel moved like fire itself, his hands releasing waves of superheated plasma that turned hollow ones to ash wherever they stood. The creatures that had seemed unstoppable moments ago now fled before him, their shadowy forms shrieking as the light burned away their darkness. Get Victor, Daniel called to Lara, his voice carrying strange harmonics of power. Get everyone still fighting. We are taking back our colony. He did not wait for a response, bursting through the wall of his own home in an explosion of flame and charging into the night. The streets of New Haven had become a battlefield, colonists hiding in buildings while hollow ones prowled the darkness. But everything changed when Daniel arrived. His fire lit up the colony like a second sun, and the creatures turned toward him with hunger and hatred, drawn to the power that blazed inside his human body. Come on then, Daniel roared. You want fire. I will give you more than you can handle. He fought through them like a storm of light, each blast of plasma cutting through multiple creatures, each movement guided by instincts he did not know he possessed. In his mind, he could feel Varric's presence, the young Draconith watching through their bond, offering guidance and strength. The ones on your left, Ben Father, they are trying to flank you. Daniel spun and released a wave of fire that caught 6 hollow ones at once, reducing them to nothing. But the power was overwhelming, intoxicating in ways that frightened him, and he felt himself beginning to lose control, the fire wanting to burn everything, consume everything. Focus. Varric's voice cut through the chaos. Remember who you are. The fire serves you. You do not serve the fire. Daniel gripped his mind tightly, calling up memories of Elena, of the children he had saved during the war, of Varric's trusting eyes when the young Draconith had called him Den Father. The fire responded to his will, becoming precise instead of wild, a tool instead of a master. He reached the colony center where survivors had gathered. Over 100 colonists huddled in the main hall. Director Grant among them, with all his earlier anger replaced by naked fear. The Hollow Ones had surrounded the building, and the few remaining defenders were running out of ammunition. Daniel landed in front of them like a meteor of flame, and the colonists gasped at what they saw. Their quiet medic transformed into something out of legend. "Get behind me," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. An older woman, the same one who had defended him at the town meeting, stared at him with tears in her eyes. "You came back for us, even after how some of us treated you." "Of course I did," Daniel said simply. "You are my people. I protect my people." He turned to face the army of darkness gathering outside, and he did not ask for gratitude or apologies. He simply stood between the innocent and those who would harm them. Laura arrived with Victor, who was badly wounded but still on his feet, and Katie, who had lost her explosives but found a rifle. "Thought you could use some backup," Laura said with a fierce grin. "Glad you could make it," Daniel replied. The colonists watched as this small group prepared to fight, and something shifted in the crowd. Shame and courage mixing until people started picking up whatever weapons they could find. "I was a soldier once," an old man said, grabbing a security rifle. "I can be one again. I will not let my children grow up knowing their father hid while others fought," a younger man declared. One by one, colonists stepped forward, and Daniel felt pride swell in his chest at the sight. But then the Hollow Ones parted, and something far worse descended from the sky. It was massive, twice the height of a human, a horror of shadow and cold fire that radiated power like a black hole. And when it spoke, its voice shook the ground. "I am the Ash King, ruler of the Hollow Ones, and I have devoured 100 Firehearts across 1,000 years." The colonists shrank back in terror, even the bravest among them faltering. But Daniel stood his ground. "I do not care what you are," he said, flames intensifying around his body. "You are not getting this colony, and you are not getting Varric." The Ash King laughed, a sound like dying stars. "Foolish human, you carry borrowed flame, a gift from a frightened child. Do you truly think you can stand against me?" "I think I am going to try," Daniel replied. He launched himself at the Ash King with everything he had, fire blazing white-hot as he struck the creature's massive form. The battle that followed shook New Haven to its foundations, plasma clashing against dark energy, light against shadow, human determination against ancient hunger. Daniel fought with skill he did not know he had, but the Ash King was right about one thing. The creature's power was vastly greater than his own. A blow sent Daniel crashing through a building, his body screaming with pain, and the Ash King loomed over him. "Yield, little flame, yield, and I will make your death quick." Daniel rose on shaking legs, blood mixing with fire. "No!" Another blow, another building, and Daniel fell again, but again he rose. "Why do you keep fighting?" the Ash King demanded, genuine confusion in its voice. "You cannot win. You must know you cannot win." "Because a scared kid trusted me," Daniel gasped, struggling to his feet once more. "Because he called me Den Father, and I will not betray that." He charged again, and again the Ash King knocked him down. But each time, Daniel refused to stay fallen. The colonists watched in awe, tears streaming down faces as this ordinary man, this quiet medic, threw himself against an impossible enemy over and over again. "Why will you not die?" the Ash King screamed, frustration cracking its ancient composure. "Humans are stubborn," Daniel coughed, rising yet again. "It is probably our best quality." Then he heard Varrig's voice in his mind, stronger than before, and he realized the young Draconith had been gathering his strength all this time. "Together, Den Father, we do this together." Their bond flared to full power, Varric pouring everything he had into Daniel, and Daniel channeling that power through his human will, his human heart, his human refusal to ever give up. The fire that erupted from Daniel was not gold or white. It was every color at once. A nova of combined spirits that lit up the night sky across the entire planet. The Ash King had time for one final scream before the flames consumed it entirely, burning away 1,000 years of darkness in a single blazing instant. When the light faded, Daniel stood alone in a crater where the Ash King had been, and across New Haven, the remaining Hollow Ones were fleeing, their ships in orbit already powering up for desperate escape. Daniel swayed, the fire receding into his body but not disappearing entirely, and then his legs gave out. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was lava running toward him, and the last thing he heard was Varek's voice in his mind, filled with love and gratitude. "Thank you, then, Father. Thank you for everything." Daniel woke 3 days later in the colony's medical bay, his body aching in places he did not know could ache, and the first thing he saw was Varek curled up beside him on the bed. The young Draconith's ember eyes opened the moment Daniel stirred, and a smile spread across his scaled face. "Den, Father, you are awake. I was worried. You slept so long." Daniel tried to speak, but his throat was dry, and lava appeared at his side with water, helping him drink. "Easy there, hero. You have been out for 3 days. We were starting to think you might not come back." "What happened?" Daniel managed to ask. "You saved everyone. That is what happened," Lava said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You destroyed that monster, and the rest of the creatures ran. Their ships fled the system and have not come back." Daniel looked at his hands, still feeling the warmth of fire beneath his skin. "The bond, is it still there?" "It is permanent," Varek said, pressing his small hand against Daniel's chest. "You carry my fire now, and I feel your strength. We are connected forever." Daniel did not know what to say to that, so he simply pulled the young Draconith into a gentle hug. Over the next few days, he recovered slowly, visited by colonists who came to thank him, to apologize, to simply see the man who had become a legend overnight. Director Grant came too, looking ashamed and humbled, his earlier demands forgotten. "I was wrong," he admitted, unable to meet Daniel's eyes. "I was scared, and I let that fear turn me into someone I am not proud of. I am sorry." Daniel accepted the apology without anger. Fear makes us all do things we regret. What matters is what we do after. Victor survived his wounds, though he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life, and he seemed proud of the new war story he had to tell. Katie was already working on better defenses for the colony, determined that they would never be so vulnerable again. And Lara stayed close, helping Daniel adjust to his new reality as a fire-bonded human. On the 7th day after the battle, everything changed again when 3 new ships appeared in orbit, but these were nothing like the Hollow One's dark vessels. These ships gleamed like polished gold, their designs elegant and ancient, covered in the same scaled patterns as Varek's skin, and the colony held its breath. "They are Draconith," Varek whispered, his voice filled with wonder and fear. "The sovereignty has come." A single shuttle descended, landing outside the colony's main hall, and from it emerged beings that made humans gasp in amazement. They were tall and regal, adult Draconith with scales in shades of copper, gold, and deep bronze, wings folded against their backs, eyes burning with controlled fire. At their head walked an ancient female whose scales had faded to silver, her presence radiating authority and wisdom, and she moved directly toward Daniel and Varek. "I am Seraph Kirillith, elder of the Draconith sovereignty," she announced, a voice musical despite its power. "We have come for the child, and for the human who has done the impossible." Daniel stepped forward, keeping Varek behind him protectively. "If you have come to take him against his will, you will have to go through me." To his surprise, Kirillith smiled, warmth softening her ancient features. "Peace, Firebearer. We have not come to take anyone. We have come to understand." She explained that the Draconith had been monitoring the situation from the moment Varek's escape pod was launched. unable to arrive in time to prevent the attack, but watching everything that followed. For 10,000 years, we believed the fire bond was sacred to our kind alone, Kirillith said. We thought no other species could receive it, that our flame could not burn in alien hearts, but you have proven us wrong. She looked at Daniel with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. When that child offered you his fire, you should have been destroyed. Your human body should have been unable to contain Draconith plasma. Yet here you stand, still burning, still living. Why did it work? Daniel asked. Because the fire bond is not just about power, Varric spoke up, his young voice confident. It is about connection, about trust, about love, and Den Father has all of those things. Kirillith nodded slowly. The child speaks truth. Our ancestors knew this, but we forgot, hiding in our isolation, judging younger species without truly knowing them. She turned to address the gathered colonists, humans who watched with fear and wonder. The Draconith sovereignty has long believed that humanity was too young, too violent to be trusted. We watched you from afar and saw only your wars, your conflicts, your darkest moments. Her voice grew stronger, carrying across the crowd. But Daniel Cole has shown us something different. He saw a dying child and chose compassion over fear. He stood against impossible odds to protect someone not of his blood. He proved that humans can be brave and kind and good. She faced Daniel again. Therefore, I declare that humanity has earned the attention of the sovereignty. For the first time in our long history, we will open diplomatic relations with a younger species. A murmur of disbelief spread through the colonists, and even Daniel was stunned. Furthermore, Kirillith continued, I formally recognize Daniel Cole as Varric's den father under Draconith law. A bond that crosses species is a sacred thing, and it will be honored. Daniel found his voice at last. I only ask one thing. Let Varric choose his own path. Do not force him to come with you if he wants to stay. Kirillith turned to the young Draconith. Child, what is your wish? Varric looked at Daniel, at the colony that had become his home, at the humans who had fought to protect him, and his answer came without hesitation. I want to stay with my den father. At least for now, this is my family. Then so it shall be, Kirillith agreed. The following weeks brought changes that nobody could have predicted. Draconith diplomats meeting with human leaders, trade agreements being discussed, and the first real bridge being built between two species that had never known each other. And through it all, Daniel and Varric remained at the center, proof that understanding could cross any divide. On a quiet evening, a month after everything had changed, Daniel and Varric sat outside their rebuilt home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Varric practiced forming small flame shapes with his hands, concentrating on making a tiny dragon that danced above his palm. Not bad, Daniel said with a smile. You are getting better every day. Lavra joined them for dinner, as she often did now, bringing food and easy conversation. Later, as the stars emerged, Varric asked a question that had clearly been on his mind. Den Father, do you regret it? The choice you made in that ravine? Everything that came after? Daniel looked up at the stars, thinking about all he had lost and gained. The pain and the joy, the fear and the love. I was taught a long time ago that you do not walk past someone who needs help, he said finally. Elena taught me that, and I have tried to live by it ever since. Varric leaned against him, his scales warm. Humans are very strange creatures. Daniel laughed softly, putting an arm around the young Draconith. Yeah, we are, but I think that might be our best quality. They sat together in comfortable silence, father and son in all the ways that mattered, watching the universe turn above them. Across the galaxy, word spread of the human who had saved a dragon child and received fire in return, of the medic who had stood against darkness, of the species that had earned the respect of an ancient civilization through simple kindness. Other species began to wonder, and other doors began to open, and humanity's place in the cosmos shifted forever. But for Daniel, the only thing that mattered was the child beside him, the family he had found, and the warmth of fire that would burn in his heart until the end of his days.